Hello everyone, Akpi here. Let me walk you through my process of how I recreated PT's original score and how I extrapolated an original full track from it. This is not the first time that I've written in the Witcher style, but I'll talk about that project later in the video. So welcome to my session. This contains everything that you've just heard, and it also contains the muted references for PT's material. So this is the little beginning part of the demo when Ciri picks up the coin and then looks out into the Kaviri horizon, and then this at the end is a sneak peek that PT himself posted on his YouTube channel with a bit more material that I decided to put at the end. So we're going to do this almost like a DVD commentary. I'm going to play through the track and I'm going to pause and unpause on specific moments to talk about techniques that I used both in writing and in sampling, and also specific instruments that I chose and recorded myself, and also, and this is important of course, how I recreated PT's material both in terms of timbre and in terms of, melodically, musically. So that's exactly where we're going to start with. First of all, let's take a look at just the tiny little beginning of the intro here, because that's what set this off really, is figuring out how to make something sound like something that already exists. So this is what we're going to hear now is the reference. So this is the original track that we heard in the tech demo. So we have these really cool textures, these really cool string textures. This immediately made me think, oh cool, I wonder if they're using something like Albion Tundra or if they're using real players. Pretty sure they're using real players based on the video on PT's channel, but it did make me want to do Albion Tundra. So this is exactly what I used for this. So this is my thing now. It divides up. Then we have some soltasto strings. So this is fairly straightforward up until this point. And then for the basses and really for the rest of the strings that we hear in this demo, all I'm using is Cinematic Studio strings, both the ensemble versions and the solo versions. And so right here what I'm using is the cellos tuned down an octave and the basses. So if you want to check out just the basses, this is the transposed cello. And then the bass. So it's a little bit of a different tone, but it's really cool to combine these and then really get this nice weight to everything. So the first thing that I actually had to do before I even started putting notes down here was figuring out the tempo. And I'm very fortunate that everything in this thing is tempo locked. So let me just play you the reference again. When I initially heard this part,
almost had me fooled through it.
Hello, Ciri. So it kind of feels a little free-flowing, and so I wasn't sure if that was going to be the whole thing, or I wasn't even super sure how I was going to replicate this. So what I did was I actually got to the climax of what I'm calling the theme of this thing, which is this. And I use this little tap function here in Ableton to get the exact tempo, or close to it, and then I tweaked it a little bit to get the correct number. And I landed on 70 BPM, so and I was very lucky because that's exactly the BPM for everything else. So and so that was cool because it also helped me figure out what was happening, like with the wind and with the footsteps and with the voice and everything that was going on there. And since it's a very textural string sound, and so it easily gets lost in everything else that's going on. So Albion Tundra, I think it's a really cool tonal fit. The notes are all by ear, of course, and I did my best to get the closest possible representation of the original material as I could, because my goal here is to get super tight and super close to the original and then create something new on top of that. Then a new challenge came in the form of what I mentioned already, is the theme, which when I hear it, it sort of sounds like bagpipes of some description, and hurdy-gurdy of some description, and something else that's almost sounds almost human. So this is what I'm talking about. This is the original. So it doesn't sound like just one thing, or I'm not recognizing it as one thing. So in came the task of rummaging through my libraries and seeing if I had any sounds that could fit the bill in terms of tone. Now, I'm also cutting a lot of material here because the original sounds like really distant and doesn't have a lot of low end to it. So I'm also trying to approximate it in that sense as well. So I tried Cine Sample's Renaissance Pipes, which is kind of okay, but the original sounds like a lot of bagpipes, so that didn't work. I tried to pair that with a hurdy-gurdy sample, which I think is from Piano Book, which is okay. And then I also tried bagpipes, small pipes, and uilleann pipes from Era 2, and Highland pipes from Celtic Era. But unfortunately, these sounded not too realistic and also kind of phasey at times, so that didn't work. What I did end up using is a hurdy-gurdy and nickel harpa from Era 2. I also used bagpipes from East West, and this is what they sound like. And this is cool because it gives us the more ensemble-y thing. But still, that wasn't... I'm missing that almost human quality. Like here... It almost sounds like children singing. And so I recorded a huge stack of vocal elements to sort of hunt for this tone that I was hearing. And so, on their own, this is what they sound like. Intentionally airy, intentionally raspy. Again, cutting a huge amount of material here. So when you combine the bagpipes from East West, the two bits, the hurdy-gurdy and the nickel harpa, and then these voices, you get... which is okay, I think. And so aside from that, what's going on is, of course, the massive strings on the bottom, the low end. I thought it was really cool how they didn't do the traditional low boom sound when the camera flips to the horizon. So what you get is the low dong from the drum, but not too heavy, and then you get the clack sound from something, and then you get the bell. So it's sort of three things that are happening to get the sound of flipping to a different camera angle. And so to recreate this sound, I got this clacking sound, and the shield hit from a sound library of weapons and medieval stuff. I cut off a bunch of high frequencies there. This is what it sounds like on its own. Then I'm using Groth and the amazing percussion elements therein, just for a bit of energy. I'm using a timpani that's ducked into the mix, so this is what it sounds like. Then I'm using Albion Solstice for the metal hits, and I'm automating the volume and, of course, the velocity to make them swell in and out. And then I'm using a bell from Era again, and so the percussion on its own sounds like this. And again, you can see that I'm automating some stuff here. I'm automating on the bell, I'm automating the mix of the reverb, so getting it more into the distance as it goes on, and I'm automating the volume as well. And once you put everything together, it goes like this. And you might have noticed that there's some sort of texture going on. The original, which I'm going to show you right now, has wind going into it because it's a scene from something. And the fabric from Ciri's cloak and everything. And initially I experimented with putting wind into it, so... which sort of fits the scene if we know it, but for a music track, I decided that I didn't want to go that path and I wanted something to actually be a musical wind of some sort. And so I decided to use the orchestral swarm whisper swarm sound here on Woods High, and it's a single note. And it's cool because it's not like a single music note that's there and it's present and it's very obvious. It still retains like the windy, wispy quality of the original, and it really only shows when the basses start to die down and it kind of pops into the equation. I think it's really nice. So it's just something that's there a little bit to give it a slight bit of presence. Otherwise it kind of sounds a bit naked. Like... So it kind of dies a little bit, so I think adding this element was really, really cool. Next, the track moves on. I wanted to create a little bit of a pause. After this bombastic initial bit, I wanted to create a small resting moment before we move on with the piece. So this little swarm of metally notes is Spitfire Original's Cymbalum. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's one of those is probably somewhat right. And then Albion Solstice. I love the guitar stuff in Albion Solstice. Oh, I forgot to solo this first one. Yeah, sounds amazing. And then I'm using Hunter Rogerson's Wild Mother Dulcimer from Volume 1 and Volume 2, so hammered and plucked, and these are hard panned, so... which is very nice. And then, once again from Solstice, I'm using the guitar harmonics. So when you get all of those elements together, sounds really cool. But for the strings, I'm using Tundra again for this little motif. Which then opens the way for the more traditional sounding strings. Along with that, I'm using Groth once again for the beautiful percussion. So the percussion group sounds like this. Using the bell again. Some beautiful stuff from Cine Samples here. And then the strings are on top doing witchery things. And this is a cool opportunity to talk about my decision-making process and how I create additional themes and motifs based on something that already exists. So we have Ciri's theme in this demo, which goes like this. But then there's a theme that goes around Witcher 3, and it's on a bunch of different tracks on a bunch of different shapes, and it's what I associate to be Geralt's theme, and we even have it on Kaer Morhen. It sounds like this. So what's happening here is that, in my mind, the Ciri theme is already sort of a dance around this Geralt theme, which makes sense. Ciri is Geralt's daughter by fate, and so it's really cool that their themes could be interlocked. And so every decision that I made throughout this piece to create additional themes is a dance, and it's a game between Ciri's theme and Geralt's theme. And so we see that right here on this sort of B section. And then a cool thing happens here on this B section of the B section, which is something that actually I think cinematic studios actually recommend people doing this, which is you pair the ensemble patch of something, So where are we? There we go. With its respective solo sibling. And so this is what we get. And so you still get the ensemble feel, but with a small spotlight on a soloist. And I think that's really cool. And also, I should point out that all of the violin ones, and just the violin ones, they're on consordino. So that gives you a very silky tone. And I also chose this because of the part that's at the end that we'll get to in a second. And there's some stuff here that I didn't use, but I always like it when people show stuff that they didn't use. So for this section right here, I had 2 flute lines that sounded like this. And they sound really cool and I really enjoy them, but I just wanted a cleaner space for this moment in the track. So let's press on. Again, I hint at the Geralt theme, but I never get there. I do a callback. And that leads us into a new section. Using a little bit of tundra again to add some air to the strings. Which leads us into the next section. Once again, I'm using my concoction of plucks here to create sort of a motor for this section and also to give it a little bit of a pulse, sort of guide the harmony a little bit as well. And then what else do we have in this section? We have, of course, the percussion. Again, a lot of groth, a lot of timpani stuff. So the metally sound is again from Albion Solstice. You can see it's called ding. Then we have a new set of plucks that make their first appearance in this bit of the track, and actually only on this bit of the track, which are the strong plucks. And so we have original cinematic frozen strings, we have Collegno on those, Collegno on the Elder traditional sextet from Albion Solstice, and then the Elder basses we have pizzicato. And so these sound like these. Pretty cool. And then we have some additional elements in the winds. So once again, picking up the same winds that I used for the theme. This is what's happening. It doesn't sound particularly inspired when you solo them. It's when you put them in a context, in a thing, that's when they work. And so we have that. Then we have the bagpipes once again. I recorded some layers of flute for this as well, just to define the melody a little bit more. And then once again, my trusty weird vocal thing happening once again. This time I doubled them. So I have one of the stacks is doing octave up. Such an angelic voice, wouldn't you agree? And then I have sort of like the lower version of that. And so I actually had to tone down the raspiness. I actually had to turn down the raspiness on some of these because they were too much. Like, check this out. But you know, I had a goal, and this clearly didn't fit. But you know, we have these voices, like the lower octave, and then if you put them together, And so this just goes to show that things can sound absolutely ridiculous if you solo them, but once you put them in a context, they can sound not bad. And then we also have something that's really cool and that I've done before in a different project that I will tell you about later in this video, which is sort of like a DIY Tagelharpa using a regular nylon string guitar and a broken cello bow. And so this is what it sounds like. And you don't always hear it, but you get glimpses of it and it's really cool, and then you get it again on the rhythmic section. Yes, of course I had to include Geralt's theme instead of just dancing around it. So I recorded this on a soprano ocarina, and it sounds like this on its own. And while doing this, I also wanted this to be sort of a solemn moment in the piece, and so the string arrangement follows that idea. But I didn't want to stray too far into The Witcher 3 realm, and so I wanted to steer us right back where we started. I really enjoyed this pause, and as you can see, it's not the first time that we have uneven bars here in this piece, but I feel like in here, you really it's almost like you're taking a moment to before something happens. And so we get this really intense build-up that then you get a little second to prepare yourself and brace, and then everything hits. So once again. The strings themselves are filling up a lot of the space here, which is really nice, really reinforcing the melody in a strong way. And so the ensemble patch sounds like this. And then we have the solo strings. Combining them together. Then we have a bunch of percussion, of course. We have the descending bell motif that follows along this theme. We have the theme winds once again, and these are without EQ now, so they just have their full body. Along with the bagpipes. And then underneath, we also have this Tagelharpa bit. So as you can see, we have two different stacks here. This is the first time that we hear the theme. This is the second time that we hear the theme. And so for the first section, I wanted it to be very familiar. It's the theme from before, but very strong now. And then for the second section, I wanted to include elements that we had already heard somewhere else in the piece. We have the voices doing the theme to reinforce the bagpipes and everything like that, but I also included the voices from, somehow I'm always referring to them in my head as the Swampy voices, I don't know, but from the sort of like big bombastic combat section. Because here we're also borrowing the harmony from that section as well. So if you check out the basses with the voices, then everything together. Once again, a small moment of rest here to sort of cool us off before entering the next section. Otherwise, we would have sort of like a... And this works perfectly fine. I just wanted to get a little bit of a cushion before we moved on to the final section of the piece. And again, I'm using Solstice guitars for this part, which are a beautiful transition element. And then I'm tweaking the bass's automation quite a bit here and sort of letting them die down a little bit before rising up again for the beginning of the next section. So. And so this brings us to the final section, and here I actually had a decision to make because technically there are two different endings to the piece that PT wrote. We have the one from his sneak peek where we have a direct tie-in from Ciri's theme into this final section. But then on the Unreal Tech demo, we actually have a different ending that's totally different, which is... And so my decision process here was, since I had decided to do this big climactic moment on the section where we repeat the theme, so I decided that we didn't really need to go big on the ending as well. And so I really enjoyed the writing on this section here. And so that's what I decided to replicate. And it's really kind of fun if you just do them side by side, so. And this, once again, was as faithful of a representation that I could create using my resources. And again, we're using the ensemble patches for the strings, we're using the soloists, and then some of the same elements that we've used before in the percussion department to, again, match as close as possible to what was happening in the original. We have the little tingy thing. We have these beautiful chimes. These I decided to add because they're cool. I really like these. These aren't part of the original. But then we also have this little sort of dulcimer kind of thing at the end. Before we finish off. And so I decided to use, once again, the Wild Mother dulcimer over here, so. And so in context, this is what it sounds like. And then we finish off using the same Albion Tundra patches that we used at the beginning, but with a little bit of a bed in there now in the shape of these two sustained notes. So yeah, that's the breakdown. I absolutely love the Witcher series, and it's so cool to write in this theme, and I really love what PT wrote for this, and I'm super excited to see how the soundscape of The Witcher 4 is going to sound like. But yeah, the other project that I was talking to you about earlier is a project that I did called Witcher Moods, in which I also created new original material inspired in the world of The Witcher 3. So we have combat theme, Crookback Bog theme, Geralt's Last Breath theme, because I assumed that he would maybe die in the next game. We have a Novigrad Day and Night theme, we have Outskirts theme of Novigrad, we have Novigrad Prison, we have a Skellige theme, and a Battlefield theme. And so yeah, both these projects are about creating something that belongs in a specific and set universe. So it was really cool to sort of follow in PT's footsteps in this cool, new, exciting Witcher game that's hopefully going to come out soon, maybe, please? That would be very nice. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown. I'm genuinely curious to know whether you enjoyed it, what you thought of it, what you thought of the track itself, the breakdown itself. So all the YouTube things of commenting and subscribing are super helpful. I also create sampled instruments, the Woodland Pianos, Spitfire audio collaborations like the Crystal Bowls and OPW's Shoe Factory, and also more to come. So yeah, stick around. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.